today. So today we're going to be studying phylum Mollusca, and mollusks are very diverse. You see here the smallest mollusk ever recorded and the largest mollusk ever recorded. So this is a very tiny snail that lives in Borneo, and it's 0.7 millimeters long. And this giant squid is called the colossal squid, and is projected to be, and compared to humans, this size. Look how incredible this is. Why don't you see these very much? Because they live in the depths of the ocean, and some of these are projected sizes. Like, no one's really ever seen these. They're just projecting based on what has been recorded, how large they can actually get. So mollusks are coelomates. So we have now moved through our cladogram. They all have body cavities, and the rest of the organisms that we're going to study are coelomates. Remember that a coelomate means that the coelom is found in between the intestinal tract or canal and the body wall. So the coelom actually forms around the mesodermal tissue, and it allows this intestinal cavity to expand as this tissue can move. This tissue, mesodermal tissue, will become the blood and some of the other organs that help transfer materials. Mollusks are also protostones. Remember, protostone is the development of the anus and the mouth. So if you need to go back and review how that is made. And they are unsegmented. And remember that unsegmented means that all their body organs, all their parts are contained under one giant system rather than pieced in different areas. So the organism can be harmed. But by far, look at all the complexity that we have achieved. These are the first, probably most complex organisms because of the coelomate, becoming coelomates. They're most likely to have been the first coelomates ever made. Okay, so when it comes to diversity, I told you that there's quite a few. There is a very diverse group of organisms. So the first class is gastropods. Gastro stands for stomach and pod stands for foot. And so these are three different types of gastropods. This is snails, slugs, and nudibranchs. And nudibranchs live in the ocean. And the snails are actually very diverse. They live in aquatic or terrestrial environments. They have gastro stands for stomach and pod stands for foot because they have the foot that is really not a foot, but we'll discuss it later, actually is on the underbelly next to the mouth, which we will see the part. So these are all gastropods. The next group of mollusks are bivalves, and bivalves you're probably familiar with here in Florida. If you've gone scalloping, so scallops are an example of bivalves, and the bivalves are identified by having two shells. So that's why it's two valves, two shells. And these little dots on this giant bivalve is actually its eyes. The next group is the cephalopods, and remember that cephalization is the development of the brain, and then pods means foot. And the reason why these cephalopods are called cephalopods is because their tentacles are coming out of their head, and so these can be identified as feet, I guess, or foot. And so they're attached to the head, so that's why they're called cephalopods. So cephalopods are squids, octopi, um, nautiluses, and cuttlefish. And remember that nautilus were organisms that are still around, but they were very predominant when we studied the Earth's history. Cephalopods are one of my favorite organisms. I think that there's some really cool octopi, including the mimic octopus, if you get a chance to study it. But they're really fascinating and very, very smart. All right, some of the characteristics of mollusks. They have what it's called a mantle, and a mantle is this material found in around the internal organs, and it's this blue line right here that you can see under the shell, and this mantle allows this organism, the mollusk, to continue to build its shell. Now, not all, obviously, not all organisms have shells, so therefore they don't all have mantles. So this is only for organisms who have shells. Notice they also have a heart here. Here's the mouth, and we're going to talk about the mouth and what this word radula is. And here's the foot. And if you notice, the gill, they actually have gills, and here's the digestive system. But notice that it's a pretty open system in spite of the fact that they're coelomates, right? Look at all the space that is between the digestive system and everything else. Okay, and so the radula is these little spiky pieces that you see here. So they have spiky tongues, and what happens is they may or may not have this, but this is a close-up in the microscope of what the tongue would look like. They're like razor sharp pieces that allow the mollusk to basically chew down and break down like a saw pieces of the material that it's eating. Some mollusks are filter feeders like clams, and they actually do not have a radula. So not all mollusks have radulas. Remember that filter feeding is like our sponges, where the water sifts through and they collect the particles that are left. And they also have a muscular foot, and here you can see this mollusk with taking using the foot to move around some, and this is a razor clam, and is burying itself into the sand with a foot. And you might have seen that on the beach, but very likely you probably have seen these, right? These clams in the beach, and then depending on the ocean movement, they may bury themselves or come out. All right, so some interesting things about these organisms. So they are the first type of organism to have a respiratory system, and you notice that they have a gill, and it's connected to the heart, because basically the respiration, what allows you to do is bring oxygen into the entire body, and then be distributed by the pumping of the heart. The gills allow these organisms to be able to do that. Now the heart, it has a circulatory system, but there's different complexities to them. And for the gills, they don't all have the gills adaptation, but it is a newer organisms that do have gills are newer in the evolutionary timeline. So there's two types of heart pumping systems. So you have an open circulatory system, which means that the heart pumps blood into the entire coelom, and so there are no veins or anything that carries the blood. So it's inefficient because it has to work a lot harder to be able to distribute all the material. Um, uh, but if you have a closed circulatory system like humans do, it means that the heart pumps the material through all the organs, through your vessels, and it's a lot more efficient. Imagine if you have a giant air conditioning. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it's a box that you put on the window and it just blows air everywhere. And your room doesn't seem to be cooling down because, or the rest of the house cannot be cooled down because the box is only in one window. But if you have a central air conditioning unit, you have vent duct systems that go to vents, and those are pipes that basically open pipes that carry the air conditioning. That's how a closed circulatory system works. It's a lot more efficient. Why is it important that they have these systems? As you can see, this organism is a lot more complex, has a lot more characteristics of complex characteristics than we've had in the past. So in order to be able to sustain life, it has to have more systems. Remember, organs make organ systems. So now we went from an organism not having tissues to organisms working in entire systems, working together, and the organs orchestrating a complete dynamic between all of them so they can actually perform the job together. This is the video for today. You are going to also see Mr. Murphy's do a lab, and so that will be your next activity.